Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Awaken to Torah. This week our Torah portion is Mishpatim, or judgments. The Torah portion is Shemot, or Exodus, chapter 21 through chapter 24, verse 18. The whole premise of this Torah portion is right rulings and the Father's judgments, and how we should act and react with each other when something has gone awry. Whether that be a man stealing your sheep, or your asses, or your oxes, we need to know how to deal with them in right rulings and in right judgments. Exodus chapter 21, verse 1 starts out the laws concerning slaves, showing that if we take a servant of Israel, of the Hebrews, then we can only have them as a servant for 6 years. And after 6 years, we have to release them. If they came in with nothing, then they leave with nothing. If we gave them a wife when they become our servant, they could make the choice to either say that they love their master and they love their wife and they want to stay with us. And if that's the case, then we, as the masters, would take them to the door and drive a nail through their ear and put a ring in their ear, and they would forever be our servants after that point. But would be part of our household as well. There are various scenarios going on there with strangers and with Hebrews. I hope you read the Torah portion and don't just listen to my synopsis of it. In verse 12 we start the laws concerning violence. Whether a man accidentally kills somebody, if he intentionally kills somebody, if he had malice in doing it, if he what we would consider murder one, means premeditated. If he had been thinking about it and laid in wait and knew what he was going to do, then he should be put to death. You know, if it was an accident, then there was a city that he could flee to later on, that the Father prepares for them once they get into the land. Various laws in that scenario as well. Exodus chapter 21 verse 28 is the laws concerning poverty, telling us how we shouldn't oppress those that are poor, not even those that are strangers among us. In fact, the Father made provisions for the poor. We're not to glean the corners of our crops. That's to be left for the poor. We'll get into a little bit more of that here in just a minute in the same Torah portion. But we're not to oppress them. If they have to sell us their raiment for the day, for food or whatever, we're supposed to give it back to them when the sun sets, because they need their clothes to sleep, so on and so forth. In chapter 22 verse 1 is the laws of restitution, meaning I think the first one that is used there is the ox and the sheep. If a person stole your ox, then they had to return fivefold. If they stole sheep, they had to return fourfold. Various things for different things that they have stolen. If a man is caught stealing in the night and he is killed, then that's just his fault. He came into a person's house in the middle of the night and tried to steal, and he dies. However, if a man's caught stealing in the daytime, it's a whole different thing. He's just supposed to make restitution. Then 22 verse 16, social and religious laws. This is just talking about, we shouldn't oppress people. We shouldn't revile the gods of the people in the land that we're of. It's like asking for trouble, so to speak. So being Jewish, if we went around making fun of Christians, and we started making fun of their God and their worship and so on and so forth, even though most of them are Judaic in their belief system. Say we started making fun of the differences in between our two belief systems, it would cause wrath to come in them. I mean, we shouldn't be mockers of anyone. So that's one aspect of it. And then when the Father delivers these people into our hands, then at that point we are supposed to go break down their idols and so on and so forth. In chapter 22, or chapter 23, verse 1 is justice for all, meaning that anybody that has a matter should be able to be heard before the judges. No one should say, well, you're not worthy, you're not rich enough, or you're not prominent enough to be heard of the judges. Everybody has the right to be heard of the judges and to have a right ruling in whatever matter that arises. Chapter 23, verse 10, the sabbatical year and the Sabbath. Okay, going back to the not gleaning the corners of our crops, that's to be for the poor and so on and so forth. We're supposed to grow crops for 6 years. And then on the 7th year, our crops are going to grow, but we're not to harvest our crops in the 7th year. That's the sabbatical year. The crops that year are supposed to be left for the poor. And whatever the poor do not get from those crops, if there's anything left after they've gleaned your crops, then whatever's left is left for the animals. You as the landowner, or you as the crop grower, are not afforded anything out of that crop on the sabbatical year. That's the time that your land is supposed to rest. So there's a whole teaching in that one little subject that we could spend hours on, but as you realize, this is a synopsis and not a teaching. In verse 14, it starts talking about the annual festivals, the Feast of Yahweh. We all clearly know that there are 7 feasts. We have Pesach, or Passover, first. First fruits, unleavened bread, vice versa, unleavened bread, first fruits. Then in sometime in the spring, 50 days later, 49 days plus 1, 50 days later, we have the Feast of Shavuot, or the Pentecost. Then on the 7th month, in the first day of the month, is Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets. 10 days later, we have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and 5 days after that, we enter into Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. That feast lasts 7 days. Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts 7 days. So during these feasts, 3 times a year, once the land is restored and Israel is once again reunited with Judah, and we're all living back in the land, 3 times a year, all of our males will present themselves to Jerusalem. This is during the first feast of the year. Those 3 feasts run together: Pesach, unleavened bread, and the Feast of First Fruits. All of them are in that same 8-day period of time. There's a 1-day feast in the middle of the year that we'll all present ourselves, and that's the Feast of Shavuot, or the Feast of Pentecost. And then in the 7th month of the year is the Fall Feast, and they all run during that, I guess it would be 15 plus 8, 23-day period of time. But we'll all present ourselves to Jerusalem during that time. Then in verse 20, in chapter 23, we start hearing about the conquest and the promised conquest of the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Amalekites and so on and so forth. And the Father tells us there, he said, I'm not going to drive them all out from before you in a year. Because if I drive them out before you in that year's time, the land will become desolate. If you know anything about agriculture, and especially the agriculture in that part of the world, either it would turn to desert or it would be so overgrown that the land would be useless for a certain amount of time. So the Father planned on doing this over a period of time, that he would drive them out in front of them, and then they would inherit the land. Then in Exodus 24 verse 1 we start hearing about the blood covenant the first time. Moses was commanded to kill the animals, and he drains half the blood into cauldrons or bowls, and then he sprinkles half the blood on the altar, takes half the blood and sprinkles it on the children of Israel, because they had agreed to keep all of these judgments, all of these right rulings that were delivered to him by Yahweh. So when they agreed to it, then Moses took and sprinkled them with the blood, and they entered into a blood covenant with Yahweh himself. Then in verse 24, Moses tells them that he's going up to the mountain. 70 elders go with him. They're not allowed to go onto the mountain with Moses, but Moses and Joshua go on up on the mountain. Moses stays there for 6 days with Joshua, while the 70 elders stayed at the bottom. During that 6 days, the children of Israel saw the mountain, saw the smoke on the mountain. They said it looked like the mountain was being consumed by fire on the top. And then after that 6 days, Yahweh spoke to Moses, and Moses came on up into the mountain where Yahweh was and began to write down the Torah, the commandments, the mitzvahot, delivered to him by Yahweh himself. The Haftorah is Jeremiah 34:8, which is the treacherous treatment of slaves. Jeremiah 33:14, the righteous branch and the covenant with David. We see that all of these things that the Father has told us to do, they're not grievous things. They're right rulings. They're just rulings. If you know your ox has a tendency to gore people, and somebody has warned you previously, you know, that your ox is trying to gore people, and you refuse to do anything about it, and your ox kills somebody, then you're to be put to death. I mean, it was within your control to make sure this ox wasn't able to kill someone. However, if your ox is not known to push people or gore people, and that happens, then because you didn't know that this ox had a tendency to do that, you just have to make restitution. It goes under the laws of restitution. If you read this 3 chapters and you begin to understand that this is the Father trying to teach us how to live with each other peacefully. At one point in there, he talks about, you know, if you see a man that you know hates you, and you see his ass laden and down, can't get up because of the burden on its back, then you're to go help him, even if you know he hates you. It's just the right thing to do. Also, if the person has any integrity at all, by you putting your personal feelings and your personal feelings towards him aside, to help him in his time of distress, it might be a way, an inroad to start making things right with that individual again. Hope you've enjoyed this Torah portion. This is the 18th Torah portion of the Torah portion cycle, and we just want you to begin to understand that everything that the Father has told us is just and it's right. He is a just Elohim. And we, his people, need to start understanding that if we do, we're not only hearers of his word, but we're doers of his word also. If we start doing these right rulings, these judgments that He's already established, then it's not any man telling us to do it. We're doing exactly what the Father told us to do. Thank you for tuning in to Awaken to Torah. We hope you've enjoyed this. Shabbat Shalom once again. Have a blessed Sabbath.